sat directly in front of her, closer than professional distance, close enough that she was aware of exactly how close, and he opened a first aid kit from a desk drawer with the ease of a man who'd handled injuries before and had his own opinions about how they should be treated. He worked in silence. His hands were steady and careful and thorough, the kind of thoroughness that cared about doing it right, not just getting it done. Gemma watched the top of his head bent over her arm and kept her expression neutral with the focused effort of someone doing considerable internal work. He cleaned the cut slowly, precisely. He dabbed antiseptic without warning and she didn't flinch. He glanced up fast when she didn't react, then went back to work without speaking. But she saw the corner of his mouth shift slightly. At one point he pressed the wound closed with more pressure than she'd expected, and she didn't grimace. He looked up. Something moved through his eyes, quick, deep, unnameable. Then he went back to finishing the job. When he was done, he didn't let go of her arm right away. He held it, not tight, not demanding, just holding it the way someone holds something he isn't ready to put down yet. He looked at what he'd done, then he looked up. This close, this quiet. "You took a knife for me," he said. "The knife was already moving," Gemma said. "I just redirected it." "That's not a distinction that changes what it means," he said. Gemma didn't speak. His gaze moved over her face with the precision she'd noticed before, the way he looked at things he was trying to understand. Like she was a problem his usual frameworks couldn't solve, and he found that more interesting than irritating. "Who are you, Gemma Elliston?" he asked softly. "A businesswoman," she said, "who grew up somewhere complicated." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have right now," she said. He held her gaze for another beat. Then he released her arm, slowly, and leaned back. Professional distance returned. Not cold, just conscious, like a decision being made in real time. "You'll have the rest of the day off," he said. "Don't use that arm." "I have linens," she said. Gemma. Her name in his mouth didn't come with miss. It landed the way it would always land, like something with weight. "Rest," he said. She stood, pulled her sleeve back down, looked at him once more. He was already looking back. She left the room. She made it exactly 4 steps down the hallway before she stopped, tipped her head back toward the ceiling, and had a very serious internal conversation with herself about the current situation and what she would and would not do with it. The conversation wasn't entirely successful. He found her in the garden that night. Not by accident. Not passing through. He came on purpose. She knew it by the way he moved toward her. Deliberate. By the way he stopped beside her. Deliberate. By the way he looked at her as if he'd decided something before he ever came out here. She was sitting on the stone bench near the east wall, the garden quiet around them. New York was doing something with the last light of day that made everything look temporarily still. He sat down beside her, not close enough to be improper, close enough that she was aware of exactly how close. No one spoke for a while. The silence was the comfortable kind, the kind that had been built between them out of a hallway and a cut, and hands gentler than they had any right to be. Then he reached out, without asking, and took her injured arm carefully. He looked at the bandage. Something at the edge had shifted. A full day of work had loosened it. He adjusted it with slow precision, his fingers exact and unhurried, the same hands that had bandaged her that morning in his office. He didn't release her arm the moment he finished. He stared at the bandage for a beat. Then he looked at her. Then he said, "I don't do this." Gemma looked at him, her arm still in his hand. "I don't sit in gardens," he said. "I don't." He paused, then started again with the careful precision of a man who'd thought hard about exactly what he wanted to say, and was realizing words didn't always obey. "I don't notice people, not like this. I notice threats. I notice problems. I notice things that need to be handled." A pause. His thumb moved lightly over her arm, just lightly. "I notice you." The garden was very quiet. "I'm not asking you for anything," he said quickly, cleanly, like he needed her to know that before she reacted. "I'm not. This isn't a request. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who should know it." He looked at her directly. "You should know it." Gemma looked back at him, at this man who'd just said something that had clearly cost him a lot, and now sat with the calm posture of someone who'd set something down and wasn't going to pick it up again. The last light kept shifting around them, stretching long shadows across the stone and brick and the hand that still held her arm. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The silence between them held enough. Then Gemma stood first. He let go of her arm, slowly, the same way he had that morning in his office, as if letting go was a decision he was making rather than a natural act. She looked down at him. He looked up, and she said, softly, almost more to herself than to him, "For what it's worth, I notice you too. I just wish I didn't." Then she walked away. She didn't look back. If she had, she would have seen him still sitting there, staring into the space where she'd just been standing, with the expression of a man who'd been handed something he didn't know what to do with, but knew with absolute certainty he didn't want to give back. Jude Valentine sat alone in his garden for a long time afterward, until the last light disappeared completely, and New York slipped from sunset into something darker and quieter, until the stone bench was just a bench, and the garden was just a garden, and her words were just words. But they weren't just words, and he knew it. And that, more than anything else that had happened that day, even 6 gunmen and 40 seconds of violence, and a housekeeper holding garden shears, was what kept him awake that night. The results came back 4 days later. Phoebe's contact, a friend of someone in New York's pharmaceutical research world, had analyzed the sample and sent a report that Gemma read twice, then set her phone down and stared at the wall of her basement room for a long time. The compound in Monica's vial didn't kill quickly. It was slow. The kind designed to look like a gradual decline in health over months, eventually years. Impossible to detect without specialized testing, sophisticated enough that only someone with serious resources could have bought it. Gemma sat with that information all day. She sat with it and thought about Nola watching her father drink his coffee every morning. She thought about a 7-year-old who'd calculated that her father would never believe her, and so had accepted that something terrible would happen someday, and decided that at least one person should know it was coming. She thought about how unbearable it is to be that child. Then she went to find Jude. She requested a private meeting through Mrs. Hargrove, which made the head housekeeper look at her with such deep surprise that Gemma almost lost her composure entirely. A private request from a member of staff clearly wasn't something that happened often in the Valentine townhouse. He received her in his office. He was standing when she walked in, jacket off, working, the first time she'd seen him look almost approachable. He watched her with that familiar, unreadable attention. Gemma set the materials on his desk. The photos, the lab results, the dates and times she'd recorded for 3 weeks. She presented it the way she'd presented business proposals her entire life. Clear, complete, without drama. Then she stepped back and waited. He read in silence, one page after another. Gemma watched his face, and it stayed composed through most of it, that shut-door expression that let nothing leak out. Then he reached the lab results. He read them once, read them again. The silence in the room changed quality. "How long have you known?" he asked without looking up. "Since the night of the gala," she said. "I needed enough to be certain before I brought it to you." Now he looked up. "You've been here 3 weeks." "Yes." "You applied to this household 3 weeks ago." A pause. "Yes." His eyes moved over her face with the precision of someone taking her apart piece by piece. "You didn't come here as a maid," he said. Not a question. Gemma had known this moment would come. She'd prepared for it. She met his gaze and said, "No, I didn't." "Then why did you come?" Gemma thought of Nola at the gala, the white dress, the silver buttons, her feet not reaching the floor, the weight in those small eyes. "Your daughter told me at the gala," she said. She wasn't asking for help. She just needed someone to know. But I couldn't unknow it. The room was very quiet. Jude set the papers down slowly. He stared at them for a long moment. Then he looked at Gemma with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Something that had slipped past the sealed door into a place far less protected. "Nola told a stranger," he said softly, more to himself than to her. "She told me she tried to tell you," Gemma said carefully, "that you wouldn't believe her." Something flickered across his face, sharp and brief. Gemma didn't look away. "She was right that I wouldn't have," he said. The admission seemed to cost him something. He was silent for a long time. Then he straightened. The composed expression returned, but it sat differently now, resting on something living and aching underneath. "You'll need to leave the estate tonight, for your own safety. What happens next will not be," he paused, "suitable for someone uninvolved." "I understand," Gemma said. She was nearly at the door when he said, "Miss Elliston." She turned back. "Thank you," he said. Simple, direct, the way a man speaks when he means every syllable. Gemma nodded once and left. She packed in an hour. Surprisingly, 3 weeks could be folded back into a suitcase that fast when she worked efficiently. The uniform was neatly folded and left on the bed. A few personal things went into her bag. Her phone, her charger, the small notebook she'd used for notes, now empty because everything was on Jude Valentine's desk. She was moving down the hallway toward the staff exit when she heard small, quick footsteps behind her. She turned. Nola, pajamas, hair loose, standing in the hallway and staring at the bag in Gemma's hand with an expression she was working very hard to control and losing by the second. This wasn't the Nola from the gala, not the Nola who'd passed Gemma in the halls for 3 weeks without a single wrong blink, not the strategic, composed child with eyes too old for her face who'd left coded messages about a loose brick in the garden. This was just a little girl watching someone she cared about pack up and leave. "You're leaving," Nola said. "I am, baby," Gemma said. Something cracked across Nola's face at that word, just slightly. Just enough, because baby wasn't a word staff used for the boss's daughter. It was a word people used when they cared. And Nola heard the difference immediately, and that difference almost broke her. "Because of what you found?" Nola asked. "Because my work here is done, but..." Nola stopped, started again. "Does it have to be done?" Gemma knelt to the girl's level. Nola looked at her with eyes doing terrifying work to stay dry. "You did something incredibly brave," Gemma said softly. "You saved your father's life, Nola." "You did that. We did it," Nola said, fierce and immediate. Gemma felt that sentence in her chest like something physical. She opened her arms. Nola stepped into them and hugged her tight with a strength completely out of proportion to her size. Arms locked, face pressed hard against Gemma's shoulder. Holding on the way children hold on when they understand that letting go makes it real. Gemma hugged her back. No hurry. No gentle prying away. She let Nola hold on as long as she needed. When Nola finally stepped back, her eyes were bright, but her chin was lifted. She smoothed her pajama top, gathering herself into something close to her usual composure. She was 7, and she was heartbroken in a way that felt unbearable. "Will you call me?" Nola asked. "Yes," Gemma said without hesitation. "Promise. Nola Valentine, I promise." Nola nodded once, accepting it. Then she looked at Gemma very seriously and said, "You should know that my father walked into 8 rooms you were working in this week." "I counted." Gemma blinked. "You counted." 8, Nola confirmed, "in case that information is useful to you." Then she turned and walked back toward her room with her chin still lifted and her small shoulders very straight. And Gemma stood in that hallway holding her bag and felt 8 different things at once. She heard a sound, looked up. Jude stood at the far end of the hall. He'd clearly been there for part of the conversation. He looked at her across the distance, composed, controlled. Then he watched Nola's back as she walked away with an expression Gemma had never seen on his face before, soft and broken and proud all at once. Then he looked back at Gemma. He didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. She walked out the door. Outside the gate, New York was raining. She didn't have an umbrella. She made it 5 steps before she heard the gate open behind her. Not Jude, Flynn Beckett, holding an umbrella, stepping out and offering it to her. "From Mr. Valentine," Flynn said, a beat of silence. "He said the rain isn't going to stop tonight." Gemma took the umbrella. She looked up at the second-floor office window. The light was still on. A figure stood behind the curtain. She opened the umbrella, stepped into the rain, and walked away without looking back. But she held the umbrella tighter than anyone needed to hold an umbrella. He didn't sleep that night. Gemma had left the townhouse 2 hours earlier. The house was quiet in the way houses get quiet after something important has passed through. Not exactly empty, just softer. Jude sat in his office with the documents spread across his desk. The photos, the lab results, the dates and times written in Gemma's careful handwriting over 3 weeks. He'd read them once while she presented. He read them again after she left, then a 3rd time, not because he didn't believe her, but because he was giving himself time to feel what needed to be felt before he did what needed to be done. 3 years. He stared at the lab results, at the compound name, at the timeline. 4 months, he calculated silently the way he calculated everything. 4 months of mornings. 4 months of coffee accepted from hands he'd trusted completely. He thought about how far it would have gone if Gemma hadn't come. How many more months before the damage became irreversible? Before doctors started looking for explanations, Monica already had prepared. He would have been sick, then sicker, then trusting the woman beside him to handle everything while he couldn't, handing her everything he'd built, piece by piece, because he was too weak to hold it, and she was there and he loved her. That was the plan. He sat with that thought for a long time, then he thought about Nola. He'd seen it. He could admit it now, in the quiet of his office with no one watching. He'd seen his daughter pull away from Monica in the very first year. The way Nola went silent when Monica entered a room, the way she stopped bringing her drawings to the dinner table when Monica sat there, the way she chose the farthest corner and watched with those ancient eyes, careful instead of participating. He'd told himself it was adjustment, that children needed time, that Nola had been alone with him too long and sharing his attention felt threatening. He'd been patient about it the way he was patient about everything, quietly, deliberately, giving it space to resolve itself. What he hadn't told anyone was that the proposal had been close, very close. He'd looked at Monica Ashford and seen someone charming, steady, present. But he'd been waiting for one thing. Not a feeling, not a moment, not the right restaurant or the right night. He'd been waiting for Nola to choose Monica. Because Nola's instincts were never wrong. Because Nola saw things adults took years to understand. Because if anything ever happened to him, and in his world something always could, he needed to know the woman he left his daughter with had been chosen by his daughter first. Nola had never chosen Monica, and he'd kept waiting, kept telling himself to give it more time, a little more time. Nola would settle, children adapt, and Monica, who'd been patient for 3 years and had misread his caution as hesitation, his waiting as rejection, had decided 4 months ago she wasn't waiting anymore. She hadn't known she'd already won. She'd poisoned a man who'd been about to say yes. Jude stared at the papers for a long time. Then he made a call. Short, quiet, 3 sentences. He ended the call, set his phone down, and sat in silence for another hour. At midnight, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked down the hall to her room. He knocked once. A pause, movement. The door opened. Monica stood in the doorway in a robe, hair down. She looked at him with the warmth she always offered him. Real in its delivery, engineered in its structure. 3 years of mornings and nights and conversation and private intimacy. A shared life. He'd looked at that warmth and believed it completely. He looked at it now and felt nothing but exhaustion. "Come with me," he said. She followed him to his office without asking why. She sat across from his desk with the ease of someone who'd sat there many times before. Comfortable, unguarded. She had no reason to be anything else. Then she saw the documents. Her eyes moved through them. Photo first. Her hand, the vial, the coffee tray, the dates and times she recognized because she'd been there for all of it. Then the lab results. Then Gemma's handwriting. 3 weeks of careful observation. Jude watched Monica's face as she read. He watched the warmth rearrange itself into something else, still composed because she was always composed. That was one of the things he'd once admired, but under the composure, something shifted. The confidence of a woman who'd walked in believing she could manage anything was meeting the reality of documents that left nothing to manage. She looked up. What sat underneath wasn't guilt, it was irritation. The irritation of a 3-year plan ruined by a 7-year-old and a girl from West Virginia who'd come to New York to sell jewelry. Jude stood at the window with his back to her. New York outside, the city doing its indifferent midnight things while this room held its own private ending. "Tell me why," he said. "Not I know what you did. Not how could you. Just tell me why." The simplest question, the one that gave her a chance to say something real for the first time since she'd entered his life. The room was very quiet. She didn't speak. Jude waited. He was patient when he needed to be. He'd learned that early and thoroughly. Still nothing. He turned from the window and looked at her across the room. "You were taking too long," she said. Simple. Flat. The calm voice of someone who had no more reason to perform. "I'd given 3 years. I'd positioned myself. I'd done everything correctly, and you kept waiting and waiting and I didn't know what you were waiting for. And I thought," she paused, "I thought you were never going to choose me. That you were keeping me close without intention. That I was going to lose everything I'd worked for. So I decided to make sure that even if you didn't choose me, you'd still need me." Jude didn't speak. He stared at her across the room, at this woman who'd built an entire plan on a wrong assumption from the start. "I was going to propose," he said softly. Monica looked up. Something flashed across her face, sharp and immediate, and completely real. The first real thing he'd seen from her all night. Not guilt, not regret. The expression of someone receiving information 4 months too late to change anything. "I was waiting for Nola," Jude said. "I needed her to choose you first, because my daughter comes before everything, before the organization, before what I want, before anything. If something ever happened to me, I needed to know she was safe with you." He looked at Monica directly. "I was still waiting. I was still giving it time. I was 2 steps away from saying yes." The room went utterly still. "She never chose me," Monica whispered, almost to herself. "No," Jude said. "She didn't. I tried. Not hard enough," he said. "Simple, not cruel, just true. Nola isn't difficult to love. She never has been. She just needed someone to choose her first before she chose them back. You were always waiting for her to come to you. She was always waiting for you to come to her." A pause. Nobody came. Monica stared at him for a long time as the full weight fell all at once. 3 years, 4 months, a plan built on a wrong assumption, a proposal that had been close, a child who only needed to be chosen first. Everything. Lost for nothing. "You can go now," Jude said, his voice light and perfectly even. No anger, no performance, only the absolute finality of a man who'd decided before he ever knocked on her door and had come himself instead of sending someone else, because he'd once loved her, and she deserved to hear the truth directly from him, even if the truth arrived too late for either of them to do anything with it. The door behind her was open now. 2 of Flynn's men stood waiting. Monica looked at them, then back at Jude by the window, his body already half turned away. She understood what go meant tonight. No negotiation, no scene, no version that ended differently. She rose slowly, smoothed her robe, composure returning one last time. Not for him. Not for the situation. Only because it was the last thing she had that still belonged entirely to her. She looked at him once more. He turned back to the window. She left. The door closed. Jude Valentine stood alone at the office window. New York outside. The papers on the desk behind him. The quiet of a house that had just become smaller and cleaner and emptier all at once. And when Mrs. Hargrove brought in coffee at 7 in the morning and set it beside him with her usual efficiency and silence, he picked it up and drank. And for the first time in 4 months, it tasted like nothing but coffee. The airport was Nola's idea. Gemma knew that at 6 in the morning when Mrs. Hargrove knocked on her hotel door, which was alarming enough on its own, and announced with the expression of a woman delivering news she hadn't signed up to receive, that a car was waiting downstairs in the lobby. "A car," Gemma said. "Yes, sent by Mr. Valentine," Mrs. Hargrove said. "Miss Nola requested it." A pause. The housekeeper's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. She was quite insistent. Gemma stared at the ceiling. Then she went to get dressed. The car held Nola in a coat thrown over her school uniform, entirely prepared to be late to school and clearly at perfect peace with that decision. And Jude, in the front seat, turned to look at Gemma when she climbed in with an expression that said he was here against his better judgment, and entirely because a 7-year-old had given him no other viable option. "She wanted to come," he said. "I heard," Gemma said. "I want to come," Nola corrected from beside Gemma, sliding her small hand into Gemma's without preamble. "There's a difference." The drive to JFK took 40 minutes. Nola talked for 38 of them. About school. About a girl named Hazel who was annoying for detailed and specific reasons. About a book she was reading. About whether Gemma had ever been to Vermont because she'd heard it was beautiful and Gemma should go someday. Nola held Gemma's hand the whole way, and every so often she'd stop speaking mid-sentence and squeeze Gemma's fingers, then keep going. Jude sat up front and said very little, but twice Gemma caught him watching them in the rearview mirror. He didn't look away when she caught him. At the airport, he walked with them to departures, as far as he could go. Around them, New York moved in its efficient morning rhythm. Flights called, carts rolling, people saying hello and goodbye in the endless loop airports run on. Nola had been fine in the car. She'd been fine walking through the terminal. She'd been very busy being fine. She stopped being fine about 4 meters from the gate. At first it was subtle, her steps slowing, her hand tightening around Gemma's. Then she stopped walking completely. Gemma stopped with her. Jude stopped a step behind. Nola looked at the gate, looked at Gemma, looked at the gate again. "I don't want you to go," she said. No preface, no layer of composure wrapped around it. Just the raw, uncovered truth of a child who'd run out of the energy it took to strategize her own feelings. Gemma knelt down. "I know, baby. Then why are you going?" "Because I have to. For now." "For now," Nola repeated, testing the weight of those two words. "For now," Gemma confirmed. Nola stared at her for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and wrapped both arms around Gemma's waist and pressed her face into Gemma's coat. And this time she didn't try to be composed about it at all. Her shoulders shook, once, just once. Then she held on tight. Gemma hugged her. She gently eased Nola back, looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm going to call you. Tonight. The moment I land." "You promised," Nola said. "I promised." Nola wiped her face with the back of her hand, straightened, and that extraordinary composure assembled itself again, piece by piece, right in front of Gemma's eyes. "Okay," she said softly. Gemma stood, looked at Jude. He looked back, jaw tight, hands in his pockets, composure working very hard. And Gemma could see exactly what it was fighting. He looked like a man with something to say who'd decided he wouldn't say it because he'd said something once in the garden and she hadn't given him an answer, and he wasn't the kind of man who repeated himself. "Thank you," she said, "for the car." "Thank Nola," he said. His voice was even. His eyes weren't. Gemma nodded, pulled her suitcase, and turned toward the gate. "Gemma." She turned back. It was the second time he'd used her name without miss. It landed differently than she was prepared for. He looked at her across the space between them. Around them, New York buzzed and hurried, and a flight to West Virginia was calling for final boarding. "Come back," he said. Soft. Simple. Not quite a request. Not quite an order. Something in between. Entirely its own. Gemma looked at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked through the gate. She didn't let herself look back. But she was smiling. She called Nola at 11 p.m. West Virginia time, which was 11 p.m. New York time, which meant Nola had stayed up waiting. Something Nola denied with complete unconvincing determination. "I wasn't waiting," Nola said. "Of course not," Gemma said. "I just happened to be awake at 11 on a school night. I'm a night person," Nola said. "I may have set an alarm," she admitted. Gemma laughed, warm and real, filling her small West Virginia apartment with a sound that felt like it belonged somewhere else too. "Now, how's your father?" A small pause. "He had dinner alone," Nola said. "He does that sometimes. But tonight he was looking at his phone a lot." "Probably work," Gemma said. "Probably," Nola said in a voice that made it clear she didn't believe that for even a second. They talked for an hour, about West Virginia, which Nola had questions about. Specific researched questions that suggested she'd spent part of her day investigating Appalachian geography on her own, about school and the ongoing situation with Hazel, who had apparently done something unforgivable involving a shared desk and a box of colored pencils Nola considered private property and refused to debate. About jewelry. Nola wanted to know how it worked, the business of it, and Gemma explained. And Nola listened with the focused attention of someone storing information for later use. Before they hung up, Nola said casually, like it was a passing thought, "My father wants to know if you arrived safely." "You can tell him I did," Gemma said. "You could tell him yourself," Nola said. "I could give you his number." Silence. "Nola Valentine," Gemma said. "I'm just saying it's available," Nola said innocently. "Good night, Nola." "Good night, Gemma. I'll tell him you said you arrived safely." The call ended. Gemma sat in her apartment smiling at her phone. 3 minutes later, a text came in from an unfamiliar New York number. "Glad you arrived safely." Gemma stared at it, stared at the ceiling, then stared back. She typed, "Your daughter gave you up immediately." The reply came fast. She was supposed to be subtle. "She's 7. She's usually better than this," Gemma laughed. Set the phone down. Picked it up again. "How are you?" she typed. A longer pause this time, quieter than I expected. Gemma read that twice. Set the phone down. Picked it up. "Nola says you looked at your phone a lot at dinner. I'm going to have a conversation with Nola about intelligence gathering protocols." Gemma laughed out loud in her empty apartment. She typed, "She's gifted. Don't discourage it." Another pause. "She asked me tonight if West Virginia is far." Gemma's hand stopped on the phone. What did you tell her? She typed. I told her it depends on whether you want to get there. Gemma sat with that sentence for a long time. Outside her window, West Virginia was doing what West Virginia always did. Quiet and dark and entirely itself. She'd built her life here. She knew every sound of it. It had never felt small to her. Tonight, it felt like it had edges. The video calls became a fixed thing. Not officially set, not discussed or arranged. They simply started happening. Nola called on a schedule with the reliability of a 7-year-old who'd decided this was now a permanent part of her life, and wouldn't accept further argument about it. She called from her bedroom, from the townhouse garden, once memorably from under her desk, during what she described as a very boring lesson that she was certain Gemma would agree didn't require her full attention. Gemma had covered her mouth with her hand and shaken with silent laughter, while Nola whispered exactly why American history, as taught by her current teacher, was a crime against the concept of interesting. Jude appeared in the calls sometimes. Not always, but sometimes Nola would walk into the room where he was sitting and simply not walk out again. And gradually, he became visible in the background, working, reading, occasionally lifting his eyes to the screen. With that calm attention, Gemma was learning to read more fluently than she'd ever planned. Phoebe had opinions about all of it. You have a standing video call schedule with a New York crime family, Phoebe said one night, appearing uninvited in the doorway of Gemma's office. I have a standing call with Nola, Gemma said without looking up from her work, and her father just happens to be there. He lives there, Phoebe. It was well past midnight when her phone rang. Not Nola's number, the other one. Gemma watched it ring twice, then answered. You're awake, Jude said. You're calling, she said. A pause, the kind that held something inside it. I couldn't sleep. Gemma sat up slowly. Outside, West Virginia was doing its midnight things. Crickets. A light wind. Quiet so big it was almost a sound. She didn't speak, and let him find his way to whatever had made him dial her directly tonight, instead of letting Nola be the bridge the way he usually did. How are you? He asked. A simple question, not a simple way of asking. I'm good, she said. Made dinner tonight. Travis came over, actually. My neighbor's kid. He helped me with the groceries and stayed to eat. Silence. Who is Travis? Jude said. Not a question, a sentence that arrived fully formed. A friend, Gemma said, watching where this was going. A friend, he repeated. He cooks pretty well, actually. Made cornbread from scratch. And is there a man in your life? Jude asked. Gemma paused long enough. Yes, she said. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. What's his full name? Jude said. Not, are you serious? Not, oh, I see. Not anything reasonable. Just the full name, immediate, flat, like he'd already started gathering information. Travis, Gemma said, letting it play out. Travis, he repeated slowly, like he was filing it away somewhere. How long? How long what? How long have you been with him? His voice was even. Perfectly even. Somehow that was more alarming than anger. Gemma had spent enough time around this man to know his stillness was never empty. It was pressure with nowhere to go yet. A while, she said. A while, he repeated, then nothing, just his breathing. She could feel him on the other end, not saying what he was thinking. And what he was thinking was loud. Is he there? Jude said. No, but he comes over. Does he come to your house, Gemma? Why does that need to be known? It needs to be known, he said, still even, still controlled. But there was something underneath now, something with claws. I need to know if there is a man walking into your house, cooking in your kitchen, sitting where I haven't sat yet. I need to know that. Gemma stared at the wall. That's not a reasonable thing to need to know, she said carefully. I know, he said. I know it isn't. I know I have no right to it. I know you owe me nothing, and I've given you no reason to. He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, rougher. I called you at midnight, Gemma, on a Friday, because I couldn't be in this house one more hour without hearing your voice. That's where I am. That's what you've done to me, and I don't— He stopped. I don't know what to do with that. Gemma didn't speak. I don't share, he said softly. I want you to know that. However that sounds, however unreasonable. I don't share, and I don't wait well, and I'm aware that I'm not being rational right now, but I called you at midnight on a Friday. So rationality has clearly already left the building. Jude, Gemma said. I'm coming to West Virginia, he said. Gemma blinked. What? 4 weeks is too long, he said simply. I'll come to you. You can't just... I travel for business regularly. West Virginia is a viable destination. You don't have business in West Virginia. I could find some, he said, perfectly calm, perfectly serious. I'm resourceful. Jude Valentine. Tell me there's no one, he said, low, direct, almost desperate under the control. Just tell me. Travis is 14 years old, Gemma said. He's my neighbor's kid. He came over after school to help with groceries and stayed for dinner because his mom works late. There is no boyfriend. The exhale that came through the phone was long and completely unrestrained.